So one thing you should never do is ask an introvert how they spend their time, as you're never going to be satisfied with the answer. And the chances are the person you ask probably doesn't want to tell you. One of the regular frustrations of an introvert is being asked the rather innocuous question. And it is innocuous and harmless, and it comes in many forms of how they spend their time. It can be, how did you spend your weekend? Or it might be one of those really painful self-promotion things they ask you to write at work when you know they're looking for an exciting pastime tagged on the end for that rock star effect. We spend a lot of our time in our heads. Any human interaction is actually competing with our own thoughts, and quite often, even though this sounds pretty egotistical, our head wins. Since we can exist in our heads, how we spend our time can sound both uninspiring to people and rather banal. You'll even get the odd person who takes us, how can I put it? They have the assumption to feel sorry for us, which is really annoying. Let's look at some of the responses you might get. I'll let people decide which are mine. You can play a game there. I'm relatively confident these thoughtful and creative activities are pretty representative. I binged a Netflix TV show about female wrestlers in the 80s until 0300 in the morning. I read a book on how geography informs the geopolitical politics of the world. And then immediately after that, I moved on to a science fiction book about robots who took over the world and who lived in a Western-styled genre universe. I worked on my bujo or journal as part of my morning or evening routine. What? You don't know what bujo means? Come on, it's bullet journal, please. I spent my Sunday pretending to be the captain of the USS Endeavour in a Star Trek role-playing game. Punch it. I may have got some new stationery. Stationery I didn't need, because I threw some other stationery out that was half used. I may have then spent several hours organising my new calendar and planner, with all sorts of stickers and fancy artwork. Writing down ideas for a role-playing game I'm going to run, which involves werewolves fighting against an existential threat from the spiritual center of... God, that makes me sound like I'm on psychedelic drugs. Discussing the book I read online as it's part of a book club. Since reading the book is just never good enough. I spend my time writing and filming YouTube videos, but I can't say that, as I don't actually advertise I have a YouTube channel to most people I know. I listen to a lot of podcasts, quite a lot of podcasts. Took most of the afternoon. I was planning my next travel adventure. Oh wait, I went away in the van and had some great walks. Yeah, that's the one. I'll use that. That sounds better. Doesn't really matter if I actually went away in the van, but you'll find that more palatable. I know you do find the fact that I go solo in the van a bit odd, but you know what? It wasn't really the walks themselves, but the space it gave me to think about stuff. So even that's a small lie. If I was to be entirely honest, I also talk to myself for quite a bit. Basically, whichever way you look at it, it comes down to I read, watched, created, or thought about stuff. That's basically the answer. You can forget the details. Every time someone asks me that question, I should just say, yeah, I spent 2 days reading, watching, creating, or thinking about stuff. What that stuff is, probably not that interested in. The question is why aren't these things sufficient? Because a few exceptions aside, no one else is doing anything substantially more profound with their time, right? Hey, you know, if you're out actually campaigning for a better world or helping those worse off than you, fantastic. But that isn't what most people are doing. You may be meeting more people, being more social, more active, or potentially drinking more. But why does that seem valid? But innumerable things that exist in a more cerebral or focused on enriching your own thoughts or personal creative interest sort of way sound hollow. The answer is that it is valid. It shouldn't sound hollow. But the key is these activities tend to just take a bit of time to explain, discuss or debate or argue about with people as to their value, rather than being faced with complete incredulity. Just saying it, putting it out there and leaving it hanging never gets the response either side wants. And introverts have learned this over many years. Quite often the truth of the answer is you, the person asking, because you don't understand it and probably aren't interested in understanding it or fully engaging with it. You just want the quick answer, which hopefully sounds unique and interesting. And the introvert often knows that before they even open their mouths to answer it, so a lot of time they don't feel the need to. They're not seeking external validation. That's why you should never ask an introvert unless you really want to get into some of the detail of what they're doing, because what they are doing with their time is, by the very nature of them being an introvert, something that needs a bit of discussion and engagement before it seems worthwhile and interesting. You'll only be disappointed. In the meantime, what actually happens is you won't get an answer detailing what we specifically did. You'll get some sort of generic answer that avoids the specifics. Or we'll train you early to not ask the question. We'll use banana answers to other questions like, how was your weekend? I was okay. How are you? I'm fine. You won't get the details. I may not be fine, but you'll still get, I'm fine. You see, we'll figure out who we can have a more detailed conversation with, and those are probably happening. Just might be not the person asking the question.